Okay, good morning, everyone. We are going to get started. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Stephen Gutsoyan. I am the Assistant Director of Alumni and Family Relations at Cal Lutheran. On behalf of the Alumni and Family Relations team, I want to welcome you to our webinar this morning. There's just a few housekeeping items that I want to go over before we get started. If you have any questions during the presentation, please use the chat box in the Zoom menu. We will have dedicated time for Q&A at the end of the presentation. When you joined the meeting today, your video was off and your microphone was muted. There's no need to change these settings during the webinar to help us avoid any excess noise or disruptions. Finally, this webinar is being recorded and it will be posted on our website for you to reference later today. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce our speaker for this morning. Mike Panesis is the Executive Director for Cal Lutheran Center for Entrepreneurship. Mike's career spans a diverse range of industries and roles, including executive management, tech startups, information technology management, and management consulting. He's also an angel investor and regularly advises startups. So with that, I will turn it over to you, Mike.
And good morning. I hope everyone's staying safe and staying sane. This has been an interesting couple of months. Because I work with startups regularly, it's been an interesting exercise for me. I'm working with entrepreneurs who are taking risks. They were taking risks before there was a pandemic, and this kind of disruption in commerce in general and in our lives in general has led to a lot of challenges for them. That I'm going to share a little bit about what I've learned from the past couple of months, and hopefully give you some advice for how to get through however long this pandemic is going to last, and hopefully come out the other end for the better. So a little bit about me, in addition to what Stephen told you about my bio. At last count, I'm on my 6th career now. I've kind of settled into academia, but I'm not an academic. I don't have a PhD. I love Cal Lutheran, and I love working with our students and with our faculty. But I have a somewhat eclectic background that includes many stops in different kinds of industries and different kinds of scenarios. I've been an entrepreneur myself, but also work for big companies as well. Stephen mentioned I'm an angel investor. That's my hobby. It's something I do for the enjoyment of it, because I've had enough success in my career that I can afford to. And I do advise startups regularly, and I sit on 2 boards. So things have kind of settled into a somewhat shaky normalcy now, but for the first month of the pandemic, I was having emergency board meetings almost every day. But I want to start with weathering the pandemic. I wish I had some silver bullets for you. I don't. My best advice to you is to stay informed and up to date. That's what I've been trying to do. I'm going to talk a little bit about the impact, not just on you, but on your customers, your suppliers, your competitors. It's very important to remember that what you're going through, you're not going through in isolation. On the contrary, like very few other types of events, this affects everybody somewhat equally. The pandemic will end. It seems sometimes like this could go on forever, and that there is no end in sight. Entrepreneurs have always, when we talk to entrepreneurs about the risks they're taking and whether they're going to be successful, survival is a very important part of that equation, and that's what matters now most. But what's also important is that you're thinking about the recovery, because we don't know yet what that recovery will look like, and you may need to pivot your business, what you thought your business was, coming out of the recovery. So let's start with the drastic measures first. I've when I talk to people about the pandemic, we always seem to focus in on let's be real. Let's be brutally realistic about our position. And I want to start there and maybe work our way up out of that chasm into what comes next and what can we do about it. If you are in a position where you have to furlough employees, it's probably one of my least favorite parts of being a leader is telling someone they don't have a job anymore, especially through no fault of their own. I would encourage you to be honest and transparent, and to not try to paint a rosy picture of what's going on. I wouldn't expect most people to, but I still hear it every so often that the employers are telling their employees right up to the time they have to furlough them that everything's going to be okay. They know it's not okay. Be honest with them. Something to consider if you are having to furlough employees is rather than sending some of your employees home, is to consider across the board salary cuts. I've worked with some startups that decided to do this instead of sending some employees home, is making deep pay cuts for everybody and keeping the team intact. If you're a startup and you have a tightly knit small team, sometimes it's better to do that than to send some folks home. And also keep in mind, furloughing is somewhat different than laying off, because it kind of implies you expect them to come back, which is also why you want to treat people with dignity and respect if you can't continue to pay them. The second drastic measure I've seen fairly frequently is paying late. If your customers are unable to pay you and you've only have so much money in the bank, it's inevitable that you may have some difficulty paying your creditors. Back to my early comments about everyone kind of being in the same boat when it comes to cash flow, is to give as much advance notice as possible, to watch cash flow carefully, to pay the creditors you can, and to be diligent about your own collections. If you have customers who are in debt to you, then treating them with dignity and respect, doing your best to pull in what receivables you can. The government seems to be very much in favor of the debtor at the moment, and I don't expect that not being able to pay will lead to any immediate consequences. But what I've always found with startups that are light on cash flow is there are times when you can't pay your bills right away, and it's the same as with your employees. And this is going to be a theme during this talk: is to be honest, don't hide, don't make excuses, is be clear about what the situation is, and indicate your expectation that you're not trying to get out of a debt. You're doing your best to pay it, but it may take more time. And then the other drastic measure I've had a lot of talks with startups about is going dormant. You may be if you're especially if it's a very small founding team, sometimes the answer, at least for during the crisis, might be to cease operations. This used to not be an option, at least not an easy one. You were either in business or you weren't. But now that so many people operate websites and apps, the marginal cost of operating them is relatively low to begin with. But we've had instances where you just stop operations for now, put up a landing page, and say that you'll be back when the pandemic is over. I see this more with nonprofits. I'm part of the Ventura County Greek Festival, and we just recently canceled this year's festival, and updated our website to reflect that, let people know we'd be back, but that for this year they wouldn't see us. So again, good communication and staying in touch are very important. So those are the drastic measures. What I'm finding is that most businesses are taking this most startups are taking this opportunity to reassess their business models. I wanted to talk about that a little bit. It's something that we talk about with our students a lot at Cal Lutheran. And when we say business model, we mean something very specific. Business model is the collection of activities and assets you have that you employ to deliver a unique value proposition to your customers, something so unique that your customers are willing to pay you for it. The diagram that I have up on the screen is called a business model canvas. And the business model canvas we see here is the business model canvas for the Center for Entrepreneurship. This diagram is the work of a gentleman named Alexander Osterwalder. He wrote an excellent book called Business Model Generation. And it forces you to think about, in a very high-level framework, what's important to your business. So I would encourage you to go seek out the book, and I'd be happy to. I realized I didn't put it in the presentation. I'd be happy to share a link to the book with you. But to think about what is it about your business that's really important, and then to think about how the crisis may change that. And I'll give you an example in this business model. If you look at customer relationships for the Center for Entrepreneurship, our business model places a very high premium on in-person relationships and as often as possible. The crisis has essentially put a wrench in that. Some of you may know that we operate a co-working space for entrepreneurs called Hub 101 in Westlake Village. Hub 101's been closed for 2 months. Like everyone else, we haven't been able to put on events. And for the center, for our teaching, we're used to teaching in person. And we teach our students that startups meet with their customers, preferably in person. And that's completely changed the way that we think about how we deliver our business model. Now there are pluses and minuses to that. The minuses are the experience online isn't the same, but we found some unexpected pluses. Like we have a new venture fair every year where we invite the community to Cal Lutheran. We have an expo style event where our students show off their startup projects. Our guests get to ask them questions and vote for people's choice. It's a great event. It brings a lot of people to campus. And instead of doing that this year, we moved it online. We had a website where our students could post their startup ideas. And now it wasn't just the community coming to visit, it was the world coming to visit. So we just wrapped up our competition last night, and we had people from 40 countries, 40, come visit our student startup projects. And in that instance, that caused us to rethink how next year we might have our fair. We'll go back to doing it in person, but we may keep the web-based option as well. So for your business, I would encourage you to complete the business model canvas for your business, and to ask yourself, how has the pandemic changed my business, and what can I do to keep my business model going, and then what changes will it bring long term? And we'll talk about that in a little more depth. What we also teach in a kind of hand in hand with the business model is that being a startup is an experimental kind of process where you're constantly talking to your customers, you're forming hypotheses about what you think your business model is, and you're testing it by talking to your customers and partners. That's much harder now, but it's not impossible. If you have right now a business where you're in revenue and you have customers, and those customers basically have told you, I can't pay for your product or service right now, I really don't need it because my customers aren't engaged. It's a perfect opportunity to talk to your customers either by Zoom or on the phone and talk to them about what their priorities are and what you can do for them, if not now, but when the crisis is over. I'll use an example. I'm on the board of a company called Whistle, which is enables hotel guests to communicate with the front desk via text instead of in person or on the phone. This business model, at first blush, would seem like the perfect kind of business model for a social distancing world. But the fact of the matter is, most hotels, if they're not just closed, don't have enough revenue where they can pay for new services. But Whistle took this opportunity to reach out to its customers and to talk to them about what challenges are you facing, what can we do to help, and what comes next. And they found through a combination of extending free trials so that their customers who they just brought on board, who they weren't getting revenue from yet, they decided to keep them using the service until they were in a position to pay. And then they have a list of new features they're going to roll out that, one, enables social distancing in a meaningful way for hotels, and two, could potentially be a new revenue stream when we emerge from the pandemic. But it is super important to stay in touch with your customers and to dig deeper into what they want from you. So let's talk. I want to talk a little bit about innovation and how that applies to your business model. When I mean innovation, it's specifically related to your business. And I want to differentiate between crisis-related innovation and business model innovation as it pertains to your business model. If you're stuck right now, if you just can't move your business forward, I would encourage you to look at ways that you can help with the crisis, whether it applies to your business or not. Anything that helps your customers. Even if it isn't related to the value proposition that you offer, it's something that does good for them. This is more a freeze than a pivot. I'm not suggesting that you go sell N95 masks because you have a connection in China, and with the expectation that when the pandemic is over, that you're going to pivot to a provider of medical devices. But anything you can do to help your customers, anything that's a good source of cash flow, is fair game. The photos I have on the slide, the top one is one of the chief scientists from NVIDIA, the big video graphics company. He's working on a low-cost ventilator. He came up with a way to build one that's inexpensive, that uses off-the-shelf parts. NVIDIA is an electronics company. It's not in the business of making ventilators, but they applied their capabilities to that because there was a need for it. The other photo on the slide is a company called Nanda, which was a startup not that long ago. Nanda makes connected devices for automobiles. And through their Chinese manufacturer, they've been sourcing and selling breathing PPE. I don't expect that this is going to be their business ongoing, but it's a way they can help, and it's a source of cash flow. This is not just crisis related. This is something I'm more and more, even as an angel investor, becoming more of a proponent of, and that's using your business, your knowledge and expertise to find sources of capital for your company that are maybe non-traditional. The example that everyone uses that I think fits in the same vein is the story of Airbnb. Airbnb, we all know who they are now. When they were just starting out, they were looking just at San Francisco, just providing temporary housing for conventions. They didn't have any startup capital. I think it was the Democratic convention was coming to town, and the guys from Airbnb are all creative types. They designed a cereal box, 2 cereal boxes, Obama O's and Captain McCain Crunch. Literally went to the supermarket and bought other cereal, put it in their boxes, and then sold it as commemorative cereal for, I think, $50 each. They made tens of thousands of dollars that way that they applied to Airbnb. They never intended to be a cereal company. It was a stunt a little bit, but it found them revenue. And you're in a position like that right now. This isn't just about your business. What skills do you have? What do you know that you could turn into a revenue source? Now, when we're looking at business model innovation, I would encourage you to look more at your long-term opportunities. If crisis-related innovation is how do I get money into the business now, business model innovation is about what can I do to improve my business on the way out. So if I'm taking drastic measures, I'm dropping my cash flow as low as I can. If I have that PPP loan where the government is paying me to pay my employees for a couple of months, I don't want them sitting around. I want them thinking about what other businesses can I be in, what other customers might I be able to deliver my value proposition to, and whether I need to pivot on the way out and what that pivot looks like. But I would encourage you to think about long-term opportunities that to the extent that you can, especially if it's with government-funded subsidies. Some financial considerations. First of all, I'm not an expert on the government funding. The PPP loan to fund your the payroll protection program, to fund your employees' salaries. I've spoken to some companies that decided not to take it, but most of them have. It's a nice benefit. It benefits your employees. It keeps them working. It keeps their families fed. But if your normal business operations aren't working, you need to find something else for them to do to make sure you take care of or you capitalize on that opportunity. Focus on your net cash burn rate. We always advise startups, look at your net cash burn, revenue minus the amount of your expenses every month. Take the amount of money you have in the bank, divide by your net cash burn, and we call that your runway, how many months of survival you have left. You want to be able to extend your runway as far as you possibly can. I think that kind of goes without saying, but I wanted to emphasize it. Also set realistic fundraising goals. I get pitch decks almost every day from startups, and I'm still getting pitch decks, and I think that that raising money now just is an uphill climb, regardless of how you look at it. First of all, when it comes to angel investors, keep this in mind. Angel investors almost always have a portfolio of public stocks, publicly traded stocks. And in the month after the pandemic, they got to watch their portfolios drop by hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not more. They were not in the mood for making higher risk angel investments. And I don't know that they are yet. I'm a member of 2 angel groups. We're still having meetings. We're still evaluating deals. It's taking time for angels to decide to revisit their angel investments as well. Even if you have the business model that takes advantage of the pandemic, that doesn't mean that investors are going to come running to your door. Venture capital is available as well. The investment criteria probably haven't changed, though. So you're still going, you're faced maybe even with a steeper challenge of convincing VCs that this disruption is not permanent, and that you're going to be able to go back to growing your business once we recover. And like it or not, if you're going out and raising money, you're going to have to recognize that the value of your startup is probably lower than was 2 months ago. And that also applies to convertible notes and safes. If you're going to go raise money, you should probably do it with a significantly better deal for your investors than you had 2 months ago. But don't expect to pitch an investor with the same deal that you were offering prior to the pandemic and for them to get excited about it. My advice to anyone who is raising money right now is to do your best to make do with what you have and revisit fundraising once the stay-at-home orders have been lifted. So planning for the recovery. If you succeeded with crisis-related innovation, don't let it distract you, unless it's worth a pivot. But remember that it's temporary. If you've met with success, it's with the goal of keeping your core business operating. Entrepreneurs can be distracted by revenue streams, and try to avoid that. Use the PPP funding to innovate. First and foremost, new products and services, new features. And if I can leave you with one suggestion, is make sure you're talking to your customers. Just because they're not buying from you doesn't mean that you shouldn't be in touch with them. Quite the opposite. It's more important than ever. And then I'd also encourage you to use this time for some personal reflection. It's very easy for one day to blend into the next, and to get a little distraught that this is never going to end, but it will. And I'd encourage you to sit down and think, all right, well, what do I want out of my life beyond this startup, and what I want to accomplish? I love this this concept of ikigai. It's a Japanese concept that literally means a reason for being. Regardless of whether you're starting something or whether you have a job, whether you're managing others, I encourage you to think about these 4 aspects of your career and your life: what you love, what you're good at, what the world needs, and what can be paid for, and to find something that is the intersection of all 4. So that you don't just have business success, but you have personal fulfillment. And then one parting thought. I swear I heard someone say this. I'm not a fisherman myself, but if I can't find a quote, I'm going to take credit for it myself. If you don't have your line in the water, you'll never catch any fish. I meet so many entrepreneurs who have been through trials and tribulations prior to the pandemic. I know this is difficult. I know this is challenging. But the fact of the matter is to figure out how to stay alive and how to make your business better. And if you do, you keep trying, you keep improving, you will find customers, you will find success.
Great.
So that's.
Thank you, Mike, for that presentation. That was some really valuable insight and information for all of our small business owners and entrepreneurs that are facing this crisis. So I want to open it up to questions for Mike at this point. As a reminder, if you have any questions, you can throw them in the Zoom chat box, and I will field those to Mike. But the first one that's come up is back to your point about the crisis-related innovation versus business model innovation. I mean, for those startups that are putting significant time and resources into some crisis-related pivots, at what point should startups consider letting those crisis-related pivots bleed into their business model going forward?
It's if you're fortunate enough to be able to pair. Well, let me put it this way: if you're doing crisis-related innovation and it's totally unrelated, while it's working, I would encourage you to find the similarities in what you're doing to help in the crisis and how your business might benefit from it. And it might not be obvious. I I'm going to post the link to the book Business Model Generation in the chat for anybody who's interested. But it might be something that doesn't seem related. It might be the channel. If you have an online business and you're helping with the crisis by manufacturing something, or by providing a service, or by something else, you may be able to take the relationships you build by doing something local and put it back into your business. If you find if you're an engineer and you're working on a low-cost ventilator and you find a supplier of a particular compressor that you didn't know about, and you find it has some unique capabilities, then maybe you take that knowledge and build it into your product, and you bring that key partner into your business in a way you didn't expect. So it's important to take the way you're attacking the crisis and understand the components of it. And maybe it's one of those components that you can bring with you to the new business.
Great, thank you. And then another question that's looking at businesses that maybe you had to put operations on hold. I think you mentioned that you've worked with or are on the boards of a couple startups that have had to do that. Do you have any insights to kind of those plans for when things start to go back to normal and business kind of resumes? What those companies that have had to kind of just pause operations are looking at doing?
The companies I'm on the boards of, they're trying to keep their routine, first of all. So if you have to furlough your employees, what you don't want is to lose that tribal knowledge they take home with them, or that knowledge of regular routines that they do. So so coming up with a way where you keep in a routine and you keep doing the things that they were doing, even if it's like calling up customers and checking up with them. It may be that instead of checking to make sure how happy they are with their product or service, it's checking to see that they're okay, that there's not anything you can do for them that's product related or not. When the recovery comes, I work with a manufacturer who needs to make sure they have enough inventory so that when orders pick back up, they're ready to go. That's a little bit of a challenge in that there was a little bit of a synchronization challenge there because they were buying components from Chinese manufacturers and assembling them here. In that case, it appears that China is waking up. Has the pandemic under control, but I would get in touch with my suppliers sooner rather than later to make sure that when demand picks up, and I'm of the opinion, I know we have no idea what the new normal is going to be like. I have a feeling the new normal is going to look a lot like the old normal, especially once there's a vaccine, and assuming that there's not another pandemic soon. It wouldn't surprise me if there was a tick up in demand, but that means that supply might be low, and your suppliers are going to feed their biggest customers first. So making sure that you stay in touch with them and get them ready to supply you once the crisis is over.
Great, thank you. So one more question. You kind of talked about what you think the future looks like for recovery for existing startups. What about what are your opinions on or thoughts on new startups that are just we're just kind of getting started before the pandemic hit, or we're in the planning phases? What does the future look like for those once we kind of go into recovery mode?
Yeah, well, if you just got started, back to if the new normal really means old normal with a little bit more social distancing, then if you had a good value proposition before the pandemic, it should be intact. We'll go back. With humans by nature want to be near each other. I don't think we're going to live our lives in bubbles. There's no reason why you shouldn't keep going. I didn't mention, and I should have, that some businesses have benefited from the pandemic, and there might even be some opportunities related to the pandemic if there is a new normal. Like, for example, it seems like one of the aspects of this pandemic that have that we've struggled to rise up to the occasion is wide scale testing. If you're a life science startup and you're in the space for diagnostics and testing, this is probably going to be a great opportunity for you, so that we're prepared the next time. It would seem like there might be an opportunity to build a network of inventory of critical medical devices so that we know where they are when we need them, and that we don't have to dramatically overbuild to address a pandemic. I've been pleasantly, I wouldn't say surprised, because I've been pleased with the innovative response to some of the challenges we faced during the crisis. And it's not just about life science. There's been a ton of entertainment innovation, of artists stepping up and finding out and figuring out how to produce music online, and how to share their talent with people when they can't come to a venue to see them perform. There's a company up in Santa Barbara called Arts Mesh. It's been around for a while. Their specialty is enabling musicians to collaborate with each other in real time around the world, which is a challenge, because the speed of light keeps everybody from being on the same page. It's a tricky type of scientific challenge, but they've got a lot to think about coming out of the pandemic, because even if people go back to concerts, they still may want an option that's a little bit more immersive at home. But there will be opportunities related to the pandemic and to the way we change our behaviors, for sure. That, and can someone please build a better version of Zoom? And it's not that I'm unhappy with Zoom, and I think probably the folks from Zoom, I don't know that they ever expected to be this big, but sometimes with success comes, I wish it did this, and I wish it did that, and I wish it did this. Like, even when Stephen teed up the presentation, he mentioned something that we had an event last night that I wish I had, which was that more than one person can advance slides in a presentation. So be thinking about in the way that you're having to change your behavior because of the pandemic, how it might be something you take forward with you, and that could be the idea that launches a startup.
That's great. Thank you, Mike. Definitely lots of opportunities going forward. I think that's the takeaway from the presentation. So that wraps up all the questions that we had in the chat. So I want to extend a huge thank you to Mike for taking the time to present this morning, sharing this important information that I'm sure will be found extremely valuable by lots of our entrepreneurs and small business owners in the community. I also want to thank everyone who joined us on the call this morning. Thank you for being here and taking the time out of your morning. One quick plug for our next webinar that's going to be formatted a little bit differently. We have Kalu alum Antonio Sessa from the class of 15, who's the chef owner of Made in Italy Bistro in Westlake Village. Is going to be teaching us how to make a delicious, authentic, homemade pasta dish, since we all have some extra time at home these days. So I hope you'll join us for that on Monday, May 18th at 10 a.m. Again, a huge thank you to everyone on the webinar. And Mike, again, thank you for taking the time this morning. I hope everyone stays safe. Take care of each other. and we'll see you on the next webinar.
Bye-bye.